Before we start, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. Also, can you please tell me where and what time you're watching? Thanks. The scent of freshly brewed coffee and warm pastries wrapped around me as I stepped into Dunkin' Donuts. I rubbed the sleep from my eyes, still groggy from a restless night. It was 6:30 a.m., and the usual crowd filled the shop. Businessmen, typing furiously on laptops, their faces illuminated by the blue glow of their screens. A group of teenagers sat in the corner, their laughter echoing through the space as they shoved donuts into each other's mouths. An elderly man by the window turned the pages of his newspaper with slow, deliberate motions, the rustling sound barely audible over the steady hum of conversation. I shuffled toward the counter, my body sluggish. "Large black coffee," I muttered. The cashier, a young girl with dark circles beneath her eyes, handed me the cup. As she did, she hesitated for a fraction of a second before forcing a smile. "Be careful," she murmured. "It's really hot." I barely acknowledged her warning. I needed the caffeine. Lifting the cup to my lips, I took a sip. Pain. A searing, unbearable pain shot through my mouth like liquid fire. My tongue instantly felt scalded, my throat tightening as I jerked back in shock. I winced, quickly setting the cup down, my fingers stinging from the heat radiating through the paper. Steam curled from the opening in slow, deliberate swirls. I frowned. Coffee never stayed this hot for long. I pulled out my phone, mindlessly scrolling to distract myself while I waited for it to cool. Minutes passed. 5, 10. The usual warmth of the cafe should have caused the drink to lose its heat, yet when I glanced at the cup, steam was still rising, curling in tight, unbroken tendrils. A strange unease settled in my stomach. I hesitated, before reaching out and touching the side of the cup again. The heat pulsed against my fingertips, just as fresh as before. My breath hitched. Something was wrong. A man sitting a few tables away must have noticed my expression. He set his own coffee down and tilted his head. "Something wrong with your drink?" I forced a laugh, though it felt hollow. "It's just still really hot. Like, unnaturally hot." He raised an eyebrow. "Let me see." Before I could stop him, he reached out and pressed his fingers against the cup. The moment his skin made contact, the most horrific sound I had ever heard split the air, a sickening sizzle like meat charring on a red-hot skillet. The man screamed. He yanked his hand back, his fingers raw, the skin peeling away in curling wet strips like melted wax. The acrid scent of burnt flesh hit my nose. My stomach lurched. Gasps filled the cafe. Chairs scraped as people turned to see what had happened. The man clutched his injured hand, his face twisted in agony. "What the hell is in that coffee?" he rasped, his voice thick with pain. I don't know," I stammered. The man, his breath ragged, grabbed a napkin from the table and cautiously tried again, using the fabric as a barrier. The second the napkin touched the cup, it burst into high flames. Screams erupted around the cafe. People scrambled from their seats, knocking over chairs in their hurry to get away. The manager rushed forward, his face drained of color. "What the hell is going on?" I couldn't answer. My heart pounded violently as I grabbed the cup and hurled it to the floor. It hit the ground, but nothing spilled. The cafe fell into a stunned silence. The cup sat there upright, completely untouched. Steam still curled from the lid, defying logic, defying reality. A chill settled into my bones. I wasn't alone. The sensation of being watched crawled up my spine like icy fingers. My breath hitched. Slowly, I turned toward the large window at the front of the cafe. Across the street, standing motionless beneath the flickering streetlight, was a shadow. Not a person. Not a trick of the light. A shadow, black and shifting, its edges blurred like thick smoke fighting to hold shape. It was watching me. The lights inside the cafe flickered. The coffee machine behind the counter hissed violently, spewing steam. A woman near the register shrieked as her phone screen cracked in her hands, the glass fracturing as if something unseen had gripped it too tightly. The manager took a step back, sweat forming at his temples. "Everyone, just stay calm." But no one listened. Chairs scraped against the floor. People grabbed their belongings and pushed toward the exit, desperate to escape. Within moments, the cafe was nearly empty. Only the manager and I remained. And the cup. The manager swallowed hard and crouched down, reaching for a pair of metal tongs from behind the counter. His hand trembled as he extended them toward the cup. The moment the tongs made contact, the metal melted. The tongs dripped onto the floor like candle wax. A deafening crack split the air, and then came the whispering. It started softly, like the wind slipping through a cracked door. But it grew louder, swirling around me. The words weren't in English. They weren't in any language I had ever heard. I clutched my head, my pulse hammering. The whispers weren't coming from the walls. They were coming from the cup. The steam thickened, curling into shapes. Faces. Mouths stretched open in silent screams, their features distorted in agony. A horrible realization settled in my chest, ice cold and suffocating. These weren't just wisps of vapor. They were people, trapped. The shadow outside moved. My breath caught as it raised a long, inhuman arm and pointed directly at me. The cafe lights exploded. Glass shattered. The darkness rushed in. I was frozen in place. The air felt thick, pressing against me like an invisible weight. The only light came from the cup, pulsing, alive, an eerie glow flickering within. The shadow loomed closer, stretching unnaturally tall. Its form shifted, rippling like black. A voice deep and hollow reverberated through the air. "Drink." My throat tightened. My body screamed at me to run, but I couldn't move. The cup lifted from the floor. It hovered in front of me, the liquid inside boiling, twisting. It knew me. I clenched my fists. No. The cafe shook. The shadow oared. Steam lashed out, wrapping around my arms like tendrils, dragging me forward. I fought, but the force was too strong. The cup touched my lips. I gasped. Everything went black. When I woke up, the cafe was normal. The lights were on. No broken glass, no flickering bulbs. The customers were back in their seats. The cashier yawned, counting the register. The businessman typed. The elderly man turned his newspaper page, and in front of me, sitting perfectly still, was the cup. Steam curled from its lid, waiting. My name is Lisa Moreno, and I work the night shift at a Dunkin' Donuts on Route 66 in Flagstaff, Arizona. The shop sits at 120 South Milton Road, a spot that sees plenty of travelers during the day. But at night, especially around 2 a.m., it's mostly empty. On December 3rd, 2019, the night was cold, and the wind outside made a soft howling sound. The clock read 2:12 a.m. when the door opened, and a man walked in. He wore a long coat, and his hat was pulled low, hiding most of his face. The shop was quiet, aside from the hum of the coffee machines and the faint music playing in the background. I greeted him with a smile. "What can I get for you tonight?" He looked at me with tired eyes and replied in a soft, almost whispered voice, "Just a coffee, please." I nodded and turned to prepare his drink, unaware that this simple interaction would lead to something I'd never forget. As I poured the hot coffee into a cup, I glanced back to see him standing silently, his gaze fixed on the counter. I added the cream and sugar he had requested and placed the steaming cup in front of him. "Here you go," I said. But he didn't respond. I looked up, and to my surprise, he was gone. The door hadn't opened. I hadn't heard footsteps. His coffee sat untouched, steam still rising into the air. A chill ran down my spine. "Hello?" I called out. The only reply was the soft hum of the machines. I stepped around the counter and searched the small dining area, but it was empty. Confused, I checked the restroom. It was vacant. It was as if the man had vanished into thin air. I returned to the counter, staring at the untouched coffee, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Determined to find an explanation, I went to the back office, where the security monitors were located. I rewound the footage to 2:12 a.m. and watched as the man entered the shop. He walked up to the counter, and I saw myself taking his order. But as I kept watching, something strange caught my eye. When he passed by the large glass windows near the entrance, there was no reflection of him. I leaned in, thinking it might be a glitch, but the rest of the footage was crystal clear. I fast-forwarded, watching myself prepare the coffee and place it on the counter. Then, in an instant, he was gone. He didn't walk out. He simply disappeared. I played the footage over and over, but the result was always the same. A deep unease settled over me. Who was this man? And how could he just vanish? A knot tightened in my stomach as I realized this was no ordinary occurrence. The next day, unable to shake the incident from my mind, I decided to do some research. I visited the local library, searching through old newspapers and records, looking for any mention of similar events. After hours of digging, I found an article from the 1950s about a man who had disappeared from a diner on Route 66 under mysterious circumstances. Witnesses claimed he simply vanished, leaving behind a cup of coffee. The description of the man matched the one who had visited the shop. Could it be the same person? But that was decades ago. I spoke with some of the older residents in town. Asked if anyone remembered stories about disappearances. One elderly man recalled tales of a traveler said to haunt the highway, appearing in diners late at night and vanishing without a trace. "They say he was searching for something," the old man said, his eyes distant. "Or maybe someone." Shiver ran down my spine as I considered the possibility that the man I had seen wasn't of this world. That night I returned to work, my mind racing with the stories I had heard. As the hours passed and the shop remained empty, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. At exactly 2:12 a.m., the door opened, and the same man walked in. My heart pounded as he approached the counter. "Good evening," he said, his voice still that same soft whisper. I mustered the courage to speak. "Who are you?" I asked. He looked at me with sad eyes. "Just a traveler," he replied. "Looking for something I lost a long time ago." A pang of sympathy hit me. "Is there any way I can help?" I offered. He smiled faintly. "Perhaps," he said. "But some things are beyond help." Before I could respond, he turned and walked toward the door. I watched, expecting him to leave, but as he reached the glass, he vanished once more. I stood there, trembling, realizing that I had just spoken to a ghost. Determined to understand his story, I delved deeper into the town's history. I discovered that in the 1950s, a man named Samuel had gone missing from a diner along Route 66 under mysterious circumstances. Witnesses claimed he had simply vanished, leaving behind a cup of coffee. The description of Samuel matched the man who had visited our shop. Could it really be the same person? But that was decades ago. I spoke with some of the older residents in town, asking if they remembered any stories about disappearances. One elderly man recalled tales of a traveler who haunted the highway, appearing in diners late at night before vanishing without a trace. "They say he was searching for something," the old man said again, his gaze far away. "Or maybe someone." A chill crept up my spine as I realized the man I had seen might not belong to this world. The following night, I returned to work, my mind heavy with what I had uncovered. As the clock approached 2:12 a.m., I felt a mix of anticipation and dread. Right on time, the door opened, and Samuel walked in. This time, I was determined to get answers. "Samuel," I called out as he approached the counter. He looked up, surprise flickering in his eyes. "You know my name?" he asked softly. I nodded. "I've been looking into your story. Why are you here?" He sighed, deep sadness crossing his face. "I lost something precious many years ago," he began. "My daughter. She disappeared one night and I spent the rest of my life searching for her. But I never found her." Tears welled in his eyes. "Even in death I cannot rest," he whispered. "I am doomed to wander, hoping to find a trace of her." Moved by his story, I reached out and placed a hand on his. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. He looked at me, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "Thank you," he said, "for listening." As the first light of dawn began to break, Samuel smiled faintly. "Perhaps now I can find peace." With that, he slowly faded away, leaving me alone in the quiet shop. I stood there for a long time, reflecting on the encounter. The world is full of mysteries, and sometimes all we can do is listen. Listen and offer compassion. As I cleaned up and prepared to close the shop, I couldn't help but feel that Samuel had finally found the peace he had been searching for. The bright fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I wiped down the counter, the scent of coffee and warm pastries lingering in the air. It was 9:50 p.m., and the store was nearly empty. Outside, the parking lot stretched into the darkness, the occasional flicker of a street lamp casting long, distorted shadows across the pavement. It had been a slow night. Too slow. Lisa, my coworker, let out a yawn and stretched, her phone in hand as she leaned against the counter. "I swear I could fall asleep standing up," she muttered. "Yeah," I said absently, running the damp cloth over the counter. Something about tonight felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but there was this strange, heavy feeling in my chest. Like something was watching me. I shook it off. Just another long shift at Dunkin. A car pulled up to the drive-thru. I grabbed my headset and pressed the button. "Welcome to Dunkin. What can I get for you?" Silence. Then, heavy breathing. Uneven. Ragged breaths filled my ear, crackling through the speaker. I frowned. "Hello?" A voice, low, shaky, whispered, "There's someone behind you." Every muscle in my body locked up. I swallowed hard, my pulse thudding in my ears. Slowly, I turned my head, scanning the empty kitchen. The only movement was the slow drip of coffee into the pot, the only sound the hum of the machines. "What?" I asked, forcing a nervous chuckle. The man on the speaker sucked in a breath. I saw him in the reflection. His voice was sharp now, urgent. "He was right behind you, grinning." A shiver ran down my spine. I spun, searching the reflection. In the drive-thru window. Nothing. Lisa glanced up from her phone. "What's up?" I hesitated. "Nothing," I muttered. "Just a weird customer." The guy in the car must have seen Lisa's reflection and gotten spooked. That had to be it. But why did I still feel like someone was breathing down my neck? Before I could say anything else, the customer's eyes suddenly widened, his face twisted in horror. And then he sped off. Tires screeched as his car tore out of the parking lot, disappearing into the night. I stood there, gripping the counter, my hands clammy. Lisa raised an eyebrow. "What was that about?" I exhaled shakily. "He said he saw someone behind me," Lisa scoffed. "Okay, creepy. But obviously there's no one here." She gestured to the empty kitchen. "Probably just messing with you." I nodded, but I didn't believe it. Something felt wrong. The shift dragged on. I kept glancing over my shoulder, my nerves raw. The drive-thru stayed quiet for a while, and I almost convinced myself it was all in my head. Then, at 10:15 p.m., another car pulled up. I forced myself to sound normal. "Welcome to Dunkin. What can I get for you?" The driver hesitated. "Just a coffee," he said, his voice uncertain. I punched in the order. "Anything else?" Silence. I looked up. The driver wasn't looking at me. He was staring past me, into the store. His hands clenched the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white. "What's wrong?" I asked, my stomach tightening. His mouth opened, but his voice barely came out. "There's someone standing behind you." Bolt of ice shot through my veins. I didn't turn around right away. I couldn't. Instead, I shifted my gaze to the reflection in the drive-through window, and I saw him. A tall, dark figure stood behind me. He was dressed in black, his frame long and unnatural. His face was too pale, almost sickly, almost inhuman. But the worst part was his smile. It stretched impossibly wide, stretching across his face like a gaping wound. And his eyes, black, deep, endless black. My breath hitched. I spun around. The kitchen was empty, no shadow, no figure, just me. But I knew what I had seen. I turned back to the drive-thru, my chest rising and falling too fast. The customer was gone, gone like the last one. Lisa looked up again, her face scrunched in confusion. "Jalen, seriously, what is wrong with you? You look like you've seen a ghost." I rubbed my arms, trying to shake off the cold creeping over me. My voice felt small. I think I did. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then, the lights cut out. The entire store plunged into darkness. The coffee machines died. The menu screen outside flickered, then went black. Lisa cursed. "Seriously? Power outage? Now?" I fumbled for my phone, my fingers shaking as I turned on the flashlight. The beam sliced through the darkness, landing on the drive-through window, and in the reflection, he was standing right behind Lisa. I grabbed her arm and yanked her away from the counter. "Move!" "What the hell, Jalen?" she yelped. I pointed at the window, but when she turned to look, the reflection was gone. Lisa groaned. "Dude, you're freaking me out." My hands clenched into fists. I knew what I saw. Then, a soft tapping sound. Tap, tap, tap. Lisa and I froze. The sound was coming from the back door. The tapping grew louder, more frantic. Bang, bang, bang. Something was trying to get in, and then, from the drive-through window, a voice whispered. Low, raspy. "Let me in." I stopped breathing. Lisa grabbed my arm. "What was that?" I didn't answer. I was too busy pulling her toward the front door. "Where are we going?" she hissed. "We need to get out." I shoved against the door. Locked. The banging at the back door turned violent. Bang, bang, bang. And from the window. "Let me in, Jalen." My stomach dropped. Lisa screamed. I turned. And there he was, standing just outside the drive-through window. His grin stretched impossibly wide, his black eyes locked onto mine. And then, the lights flickered back on. The machines hummed to life. The whispering stopped. The banging disappeared. The store was silent. Lisa and I stood there panting, our bodies trembling. The doors were still locked. The parking lot was empty. The man was gone. But as I turned back to the drive-through window, my stomach turned to ice, because on the glass, scratched in deep, jagged letters, "See you soon." My name is Caleb Foster, and I was the night shift manager at a Dunkin' Donuts in New Orleans. Night shifts were always the same, quiet, almost too quiet. Just me, the machines, and the occasional late-night customer. The hum of the refrigerators, the soft drip of the coffee maker, the distant sound of cars on empty streets. It was routine, predictable. That night was no different. I leaned against the counter, sipping my coffee, fighting off the weight of exhaustion. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, the hands barely moving. No customers, no deliveries, just silence. Then, the phone rang. The sharp, unexpected sound made me flinch. I frowned, setting my cup down. Who the hell would be calling at this hour? I reached for the receiver. Dunkin' Donuts, how can I help you? For a moment, there was only static. Then, a whisper. Your coffee is ready. The voice was rough, broken, like someone forcing words through shredded vocal cords. A chill ran down my spine. I turned, my eyes sweeping over the counter. A cup of coffee sat there, fresh, steaming, untouched. My stomach twisted. I hadn't made that coffee. The machines had been silent. I hadn't heard the familiar hiss of brewing, the clatter of a cup being set down. I took a slow, shaky step forward, the heat of the steam brushing against my face. Hello? My voice barely broke the silence. No answer. I glanced toward the entrance. The doors were locked. The drive-thru was empty. The security cameras blinked overhead, recording everything. But I already knew there would be nothing unusual. Nothing I could see anyway. I reached out, my fingers wrapping around the cup. It was warm. Too warm. Like it had just been poured. Then, the phone rang again. I jumped, nearly dropping the... My hands were shaking as I picked up the receiver. Who is this? I demanded. The whisper returned, softer this time. Drink it. I slammed the phone down. My pulse pounded in my ears. My gaze flickered back to the cup. The coffee inside moved. Tiny ripples spread across the surface like something had disturbed it. The steam rose higher, twisting, curling into impossible shapes before vanishing. Then, the cup slid across the counter on its own. I stumbled back. My breath came fast, sharp. This had to be a prank. The exhaustion was getting to me. That was it. Then, I heard them. Footsteps. Soft. Slow. Moving behind me. I spun around, my heart hammering. The store was empty. Tables lined up neatly, the kitchen still, the deep fryer off, the ovens cold. But the footsteps continued. Tap, tap, tap. They circled me. Though I saw nothing, I swallowed hard, my throat dry. The air felt thick, pressing against my chest. Then a whisper right beside my ear. You're not alone. I stumbled back, my elbow knocking into the counter. The coffee cup toppled over, spilling black liquid everywhere. But the cup itself remained full. I grabbed my keys. My feet moved before I could think. I bolted for the door, hands trembling as I fumbled to unlock it. Then, the phone rang again. Froze. My stomach twisted into a knot. I turned, my skin slick with cold sweat. The ringing echoed through the store. I had two choices, run or answer. My fingers curled into a fist. I wasn't going to let some prank scare me. I picked up the receiver. Who are you? My voice was hoarse. The whisper chuckled, low, amused. You already know. The line went dead. The air changed. The store felt colder now, like something was watching me. I pulled out my phone, hands shaking, and opened the security camera app. If someone was messing with me, I'd catch them. But as I scrolled through the footage, my blood turned to ice. The cameras showed the counter, the tables, the kitchen. But I wasn't there. I checked again. My heart pounded in my chest. The store was empty. I waved a hand in front of the camera, staring at the live feed on my phone. Nothing moved. Then, in the corner of the screen, something shifted. A shadow. Tall. Still. Watching me. I turned. My breath caught in my throat. There was nothing there. The whisper returned. Your shift is over. Then. The lights went out. Darkness swallowed the store. The silence was thick. suffocating. I reached for my phone. The screen flickered. Then it shut off. A sound began. Tap, tap, tap from the coffee machine. My chest tightened. Forcing myself to move, I raised my flashlight, its weak beam slicing through the dark. The machine was brewing, but I hadn't touched it. A cup slid into place. Hot liquid poured itself in. Steam rose, thick, curling unnaturally. Then, in the reflection of the machine's glass, I saw him. A figure, tall, grinning, standing right behind me. I spun around, my breath caught in my throat. Nothing. But the whisper was closer now. It's ready. I lunged for the door. It wouldn't open. The phone rang, the cameras blinked. The security footage still showed an empty store. Even though I was standing right there, the whispers grew louder. Drink it. The coffee sat on the counter waiting. The steam curled toward me, twisting like reaching fingers. I clenched my fists. I won't. A pause. Then, laughter, low, crackling. Then, I'll drink you. The lights flickered back on. But the store wasn't empty anymore. They were there. Dark figures filled the seats, unmoving, faces hidden in shadow. One by one, they turned toward me. Their mouths opened, and they whispered, in perfect unison, "Your coffee is ready." I ran to the phone, my fingers dialing 911. It rang. And then, a voice. "Levin, what's your emergency?" "Help me," I gasped. "There's something in the store." The operator's voice was calm. "Sir, we received a report from your location." I froze. "What?" "We traced a call from inside your store," she continued. A man whispered that he was trapped. The blood in my veins turned to ice. "And?" My voice was barely a whisper. The operator hesitated. He said, a pause. Then, "Tell Caleb his coffee is ready." The line went dead. I turned back to the counter. The cup sat there, waiting. My phone buzzed in my hand. Unknown number. I didn't answer, but the whisper came anyway. "See you tomorrow." Halloween in Salem is always hectic. The streets are packed with people in masks, laughing, taking pictures. Pumpkins sit on doorsteps, their carved faces glowing from within. The air is thick with the scent of caramel apples, roasted nuts, and something else, something strange. Maybe it's just the cold mixing with the city smells. My name is Ethan Carter, and I study at Salem State University. My friends and I had spent the evening at a haunted house event. It was fun, but now it was late, and we were exhausted. As we walked through the busy streets, passing small shops and restaurants, I spoke up. "Anyone want coffee?" "Nah, I just want to get home," Jake said, stretching. "I could eat," Riley added. "Let's stop for a bit." We spotted a Dunkin' Donuts on the corner. The lights inside were still on, but the street outside was eerily empty. No cars, no people. That felt odd, but I brushed it off. As we stepped inside, something felt off. The familiar scent of fresh donuts and warm coffee filled the air, yet the place was too quiet. No music, no machines running, just silence. Behind the counter stood a pale, thin man. His skin was so light it almost looked gray. His dark hair slicked back and his eyes too large for his face. The worst part, he never blinked. "Welcome," he said in a low, flat voice. I hesitated before stepping forward. One black coffee, please." His eyes never left mine, not even as he reached for the cup. His fingers were long, unnaturally thin, and when his hand brushed mine, it was ice cold. I took the coffee and quickly returned to our table. As I sipped, a strange feeling gnawed at me. Something was wrong. That's when Riley leaned in, whispering, "Ethan, who are you looking at?" I frowned. The barista, her face paled. Ethan, there's no one there. I turned to look. The counter was empty. My heart pounded. I glanced at Jake, expecting him to laugh and say it was a joke, but he looked just as confused. There was someone there, I insisted, my voice small. Jake shook his head. Dude, no one's behind the counter, I thought. This place was self-serve or something. I turned back again, nothing. The door leading to the back was slightly open, but no one came out. But he gave me this, I whispered, holding up the steaming cup in my hands. It felt real, too real. Riley swallowed hard. Ethan, I don't like this. I forced a laugh. Okay, maybe I imagined it. But my hands trembled as I set the cup down. The cafe felt wrong, too clean. The chairs were perfectly arranged, the counters spotless, the trash cans empty. Something about that unsettled me. My gaze drifted to the security cameras in the corner. The red light blinked. If there's a camera, there has to be footage, I said. Let's check. I stood, but before I could take a step, the receipt printer whirred to life. We jumped as a slip of paper slid out. I hesitated before picking it up. Order. 1 black coffee cashier. Mark time, 11:45. PM total, 0. I turned to Jake and Riley. Did either of you hear the barista say his name? They both shook their heads. My gaze drifted to the employee board near the register. 5 workers smiled in their pictures, but my stomach turned when I saw the one in the middle. Markel in loving memory. A black ribbon was pinned to his photo. Below his name, died, October 31st, 1997. The printer whirred again. Another receipt slid out. Just one word this time. Run. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed Riley's wrist and bolted for the door. Jake was right behind us. We reached the glass doors and shoved. Nothing. They wouldn't budge. Jake yanked at the handle. It's locked. I pounded on the glass. Outside, the street looked normal. People walked by, chatting, laughing, but no one noticed us. It was open when we came in, Riley cried. Behind us, the receipt. Printer kept running, paper spilling onto the floor. I picked one up. The words burned into my brain. He sees you. Then, tap, 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 a soft sound behind us. I turned. The barista stood behind the counter again, head tilted, that eerie smile never changing. And then, for the first time, he blinked. The moment his eyes closed, the lights shut off. Darkness swallowed the room. Riley screamed. I fumbled for my phone flashlight and clicked it on. The beam barely reached past my hand. The cafe felt different, like the walls had shifted. Then a whisper. Close. Too close. You forgot your receipt. I spun, my phone's light flickering. The barista's face was inches from mine. His skin was as pale as paper, his breath ice cold. My heart slammed against my ribs. I grabbed Riley's hand and ran. Jake stumbled behind us. The cafe was changing. The walls cracked, revealing rotting wood and rusted metal. The display case was covered in mold. And the worst part? The door was gone. We were trapped. I turned back toward the counter. The barista was still there, watching. His smile had widened. In his hand, he held a cup of coffee. Steam curled from it, but the liquid inside was pitch black, darker than the night itself. It was darker than any coffee I had ever seen. The barista lifted it toward me, and then he spoke the words that made my skin crawl. Drink. The word hung in the air like a command, heavy and undeniable. The cup remained perfectly still in his unnaturally long fingers, steam rising from it in strange, curling patterns, twisting and coiling as if alive. The scent hit me, strong, burnt, bitter, and beneath it, something rotten. I tried to step back, but my body wouldn't move. My feet felt glued to the floor. My head grew heavy, a thick fog settling in my mind. My arms lifted, on their own. Ethan, don't. Riley's voice sounded distant, like she was calling from the end of a long tunnel. I wanted to stop. I wanted to look at her, to do anything but move forward. But I couldn't. My fingers trembled as they reached for the cup. The instant they touched it, a wave of cold surged through me like ice flooding my veins. My breath hitched. The cafe blurred around me, the edges of my vision twisting, warping. The walls no longer looked like walls at all. Then, the whispers began again. Drink, drink, drink. Ethan, wake up. Suddenly, something yanked me backward. The cup slipped from my fingers, but before it hit the floor, it vanished, swallowed by the shifting shadows creeping across the tiles. Jake was gripping my shoulders, shaking me. "We need to get out of here." I turned to look at the barista. His smile was gone. His face twitched, his expression faltering for the first time. Then he blinked, rapidly, unnaturally, like he wasn't supposed to. And then, the entire room shook. The floor cracked beneath us. The walls peeled away like old brittle paper, revealing something behind them. Not bricks, not wood. Darkness, living, writhing darkness. Inside it, faces, hands, mouths, whispering in a language I didn't understand. The barista stepped backward into the shifting void, and it swallowed him whole. But the darkness didn't stop. It lunged for us. Run. The thought barely formed in my mind before my legs moved on their own. Riley and Jake were right behind me. As we bolted toward the back of the cafe, the floor splintered beneath our feet, the walls dissolving into the swirling black void. It wasn't empty space. It was alive, shifting, whispering, pulling at the very fabric of reality. Tables and chairs crumbled into dust as we ran. They didn't just break apart. They vanished, as if they had never existed. I shoved through the swinging kitchen door, nearly stumbling. The air inside was thick, pressing down on me like I had stepped into a place that didn't belong in this world. The walls were covered in newspaper clippings. I scanned the headlines, my stomach twisting. All missing persons. The photos were old, faded, their edges curling, but the dates were clear. October 31st, year after year, someone disappeared on Halloween night. Jake swore under his breath. "What is this place?" Before I could answer, Riley screamed. I spun around just in time to see a shadowy hand wrap around her ankle. It was pulling her backward, toward the creeping darkness spilling across the floor. She kicked and thrashed, but the grip held tight. Her hands clawed at the tiles, eyes wide with terror. I lunged, grabbing her arms. "Hold on!" Jake grabbed her other arm, pulling with everything he had. The shadow pulled back, stretching, twisting, like liquid smoke. The whispers grew louder, rising into a terrible chorus. My heart pounded. My hands were numb from the cold, my grip slipping. Riley sobbed, "It won't let go." I gritted my teeth and pulled harder. The shadow hissed, writhing. And then, Riley broke free. We tumbled backward onto the floor, gasping for breath. The darkness screeched, retreating for just a moment. That's when I saw it. A rusty metal door, half hidden behind an old shelf. I scrambled to my feet, grabbed the handle. It was ice cold, but I didn't care. I shoved it open. We ran. The moment our feet hit the pavement outside, everything stopped. The whispers, the screeching, the sound of the cafe breaking apart. Gone. I turned, chest heaving. The Dunkin' Donuts was gone. We stood there, panting, shivering in the cold night air. The street looked normal. Cars drove by. A couple walked past, laughing, unaware of what had just happened. Riley clutched my arm, her fingers trembling. "Tell me you see it. Tell me it's still there." But it wasn't. Not closed. Not abandoned. Gone. The lot stretched before us, cracked pavement covered in weeds, like the cafe had never existed. Jake shook his head, eyes wide. "This isn't real. We were just in there. He stopped. Something fluttered on the ground. A small slip of paper, a receipt. I bent down, my hands shaking as I picked it up. The words burned into my mind as I read, "Order 1 black coffee. Cashier. Mark time. 11:45 p.m. Total. $0. But then, another line appeared. Fresh black ink, printed. Right before my eyes. See you next Halloween. My breath caught. My pulse thundered in my ears. I looked up and froze. In the reflection of a nearby store window, the barista stood behind us, smiling.